If I may have your attention, please, I'd like to welcome you to the newest installment of Modern Saviors, where we study superhero mythology and contemporary legends. Tonight, however, is a special installment because we will finally settle a debate once and for all. Everyone asks the wrong question about Batman. Does Batman kill his enemies is the wrong question entirely. Through an abundance of Batman media, we have seen him explain that he does not kill his enemies as not to inflict the same violence that created him and to avoid moral equivalence with his enemies. Batman does not kill. However, Batman has killed. So why? What forces are powerful enough to make him break his one rule? What could push Batman so far over the edge that he would cross his own line? Was there another way out? Is killing the attacker the more heroic action than letting the victim die and keeping his hands clean? What happens to this rule when a crime fighter goes to war? Batman does not kill, but he has. So why? A Batman that has taken a life does not invalidate the iteration by any means. It rather gives us a Batman story that shows us how important that rule is for him. What does it take to make him break his rule is the true measure of his strength and heroism. This essay will examine the highest order of that type of Batman story. For a Batman story to have some sort of grounding in reality, there will not always be some magical way out for him. Not without it being a total fantasy that lacks any sort of stakes. There are certain specific instances where the death of the adversary is the more heroic act. So when is Batman killing the enemy the more heroic action in his own eyes? The easy answer being never, if possible. Once again, Batman does not kill, but he has. So why? There are at least 10 stories where Batman has killed an enemy, with those being The Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year 2, Gotham by Gaslight, Batman, Batman Returns, Superman Red Sun, The Dark Knight, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, The Batman Who Laughs, and Dark Knight's Metal. Obviously, every other Batman story does not include Batman taking a life, because in the majority of his stories, he will follow his standard modus operandi. However, stories where Batman has not killed are irrelevant to this essay, because it is not that Batman kills, but that he has killed. The primary stories that this essay will cover all have a commonality to be derived from them that will lead us to an answer as to what is powerful enough to make Batman cross his own line. This essay will only consider stories where Batman has killed, because the goal is to discover the specific circumstances of when Batman kills. We have heard numerous times Batman tell us his creed. We have all heard it and we all know it. The end of the animated film Batman Hush puts it as plainly as can be. The only Batman stories that are relevant to this essay are stories where Batman has killed, because we are trying to find out why. When he does kill, why does Batman kill? The epic DC stories that will constitute the analysis of why Batman is killed are Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, and Bruce Timm's Justice League The Savage Time. Let me make this explicitly and pertinently clear. Only under two circumstances does Batman kill. In the face of insurmountable child endangerment and the desolation of war, Batman kills. The legendary death of Thomas and Martha Wayne instilled a strict moral code within Batman upon Bruce's creation of him. He vowed never to take a life so that he may avoid inflicting the pain of the loss of a parent onto any of Batman's victims' children that are unbeknownst to him. He imposes this rule onto himself to spare the child the pain that he himself experienced. However, there is one possible fate worse for a child than the loss of their parents, and Batman knows that. The biggest game changer in all of Batman comics will forever be Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. It offered a new perspective on the Batman that had never been attempted. Miller told the story as if Batman had aged along the natural timeline since his debut in 1939. He told the story as if he did not live in a timeless state. So an older, slower Batman could not afford to take as many chances as his younger self. However, his age-depleted strength had no effect on his morals. Amidst the outrage of extreme gang violence and the fallout of a nuclear detonation, Batman cracked down on the rampaging violence throughout the city with his fist and his wits. After taking control of the mutant gang, following a violent fight with the leader, and shattering a rifle over his knee, Batman declares to his new army of sycophants that the lethal means are not the way. However, earlier in this story, Batman uses lethal force himself. Some people call the Batman a hypocrite in this story, but it's not that simple. The circumstances are completely different. Batman did not want his newfound gang using lethal force on the masses of Gotham because of all the innocent people that would suffer as a result. Earlier in the story, Batman smashes through drywall with the entire force of his body, while simultaneously disarming the assailant on the other side and grabbing the gun for himself. Across the room from him stands one of the mutant gang members holding a gun to the head of a small child. The gang member reassures Batman that he will pull the trigger, so something must be done. As the criminal tells Batman to believe him when he says that he will kill that child, Batman fires his weapon and delivers the killing blow. In the following panel, we see blood splattered against the wall as the criminal falls to the ground. Interestingly, in this panel, the child remains colorful as the criminal is colored in black and white, which visually indicates that the child is saved and the criminal is dead. Batman's only options were to kill the criminal or let the child die. There was no other way out. No batarang to throw, no plot armor, and no ex machina. Batman had to take action or allow the child to meet certain death. Under the duress of this circumstance, Batman kills. When your options are to kill the criminal and save the child, or refuse to kill him and allow the child to die. Killing the criminal and saving the child will always be the more heroic option. The options make the loss of life insurmountable in this situation. Either the child or the criminal will die. The choice is clear. If Batman has to kill a criminal to save the life of a child, then Batman kills. Batman faced a similar dilemma in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Throughout the monumental film, the Joker is slowly pushing Batman towards madness in an effort to make him break his one rule. However, the criminals in town had grown wise to Batman's act. They knew he had rules and that the enemy he was facing did not. After throwing Salvatore Maroni off a short balcony, Batman's interrogation of him does not go as planned when Maroni tells him that
nobody's gonna tell you nothing. That wise to your act. You got rules. The Joker, he's got no rules. Nobody's gonna cross him for you. You want this guy, you got one way. But you already know what that is.
Maroni is trying to make Batman realize that the Joker's unpredictability makes it unaffordable to challenge him. They know how Batman operates, and they would rather take their chances with him and still have their lives. Nobody in Gotham with any sense is going to cross the Joker for Batman. When Harvey Dent finds out that his beloved Rachel has been targeted as the next victim, he goes on a vengeful rampage to try and get some answers. Harvey abducts Thomas Schiff and holds a gun to his head, telling him to talk as he flips a coin. But before the coin can land, Batman catches it. Batman scorns Harvey and asks him rhetorically if he would leave a man's life to chance. Harvey's response is, not exactly. And truthfully, he wasn't. His coin bore heads on both sides, so he had rigged the toss. Harvey is still Gotham's White Knight at this point, and he is still on the hero path. He's not leaving people's lives to chance. Batman won't leave any lives to chance either. As Harvey is recovering from his character-defining incident of being blown half to hell, the Joker pays him a visit. The Joker pleads his case to Harvey in hopes that he won't blame him for his condition and the loss of Rachel. Earlier, Harvey realizes that the coin Batman had dug out of the rubble had been damaged on one side. So with nothing left to lose, Harvey attempts the Joker's bargain and flips the coin over the Joker's own life. Enjoying this to an extreme, the Joker survives the coin toss. Harvey doesn't blame the Joker for his pain after this. He understands that the Joker leaves everything to chance, especially people's lives. Following this intense exchange, Harvey goes on a rampage to hunt down whoever let the mad dog off the leash. The film comes to an epic conclusion as Harvey has a gun in one hand and Commissioner Gordon's little boy in the other, standing next to a high ledge. With Gordon defeated, Batman stands across from Two-Face as he flips a coin to determine his life. Batman's life was left to chance and he lost the toss. Next up is Gordon's child. Harvey forces Gordon to tell his son that everything is going to be okay as he flips the coin to determine the child's life. Batman does not leave any lives to chance. So before the coin can land, and with Harvey distracted, Batman rises from his bullet wound and tackles Harvey over the ledge and catches the child. Harvey fell to his death. Batman kills. With the flips of Harvey's coin, everything is left to the harsh reality of one or the other. So it is important to consider what the alternative would have been for Batman. The only alternative to putting a stop to Harvey's actions would have been inaction on Batman's part. To do nothing, to possibly let the child die, to leave it to chance. In The Dark Knight, Batman faces only 50% less of a chance that a child would die than in the aforementioned story with The Dark Knight Returns. In Miller's story, Batman knew that there was 100% certainty that the child would survive if he acted. Once again, Batman values the child's life far more than the criminal's because the child's own death is the only fate worse than the orphaning he experienced. Thus, the willingness to abandon his rule in the face of insurmountable child endangerment. Once again, the more heroic action was to kill the criminal rather than to let the child die. In The Dark Knight Returns, the chance of a child dying in the case of inaction was 100%. In The Dark Knight, without action, the chances were 50%. And Batman does not leave lives to chance. When it comes to insurmountable child endangerment, even if there is a 1% chance that a child may die, Batman kills. As a few blocks of Metropolis falls to rubble, Bruce Wayne hugs a young girl who had just lost her mother in the catastrophe of the Black Zero event. Batman's origins instilled within him the code of never killing his enemies at the risk of creating orphans. However, Zod's destruction and Superman's equivalent power created plenty of orphans that day. Batman begins the abandonment of his rules in the face of unpredictability and powerlessness. Batman kills in a situation where a single being has the power to create the conditions of his origin on a cataclysmic scale. In Alfred's famous line from the film, he tells Bruce that he is becoming more cruel due to his powerlessness when facing Superman. Powerlessness in this context is defined by how Batman cannot preserve his heroism without taking a life. At this point in the film, no one knows what Superman's intentions are, and he is robbed of any chance to speak or explain himself. As we discussed in The Brilliance of BVS, the defining contemporary epic, Batman cannot afford to take any chances, because if he waits too long, if he waits for the threat to fully materialize, knowing its capability, it would be far too late. The amount of endangered children and innocent lives at stake while Superman's intentions are unknown and while he roams freely are too great to risk inaction. The death of Superman is paramount to the safety of the world. Batman cannot let a few mercenaries stand in the way of the thing he needs to eliminate the world-ending threat. The stakes are too high. And so, while believing that Superman will bring about the end of the world, the potential for further orphaned and even deceased children is too great for Batman to honor his own imposed restrictions. In The Dark Knight Returns, there is a 100% chance that the child will perish if the criminal remains alive. In The Dark Knight, there is at least a 50% chance that Gordon's son will be murdered at the hands of Harvey Dent if Batman does not act. In Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, even if there is a 1% chance that children will experience the loss of their parents or their own lives, Batman must act. Each percentage is far too high for Batman to honor his code, knowing what the alternative would be. The potential loss of a child's life is far more crucial to the future of the world than the death of a murderous criminal or the preservation of Batman's unsullied hands. In the face of insurmountable child endangerment, Batman dispatching the criminal is the more heroic action than letting the child die. The slaughtering of the lamb is unforgivable. The tactics of a crime fighter prove useless against standing armies of soldiers. Stealth and the use of the shadows would be rendered completely ineffective against seemingly infinite soldiers with advanced technologies. The urban environment is also a key factor in Batman's effectiveness, and without that, he would have to develop a new style of combat. When overwhelmed by armies and fighting mindless monsters, the desolation of war will constantly create a situation where Batman kills. In Bruce Timm's animated spectacle, Justice League: The Savage Time, we witness all members of the team, besides Batman, get sent back to a time period that evokes the atmosphere of World War II. The immortal Vandal Savage serves as a Hitlerian figure in this episode, and he plans to conquer the world and rule it for the rest of time. The Justice League eventually wound up in a future where Savage had won, and the future totalitarian state belonged to him. They meet the leader of a resistance group fighting underground against the machine. Following the resistance leader back to his base, they walk past stockpiles of weapons and armaments and supplies that the resistance had managed to acquire. Besides the obvious black armor that the resistance leader dons, we learn that he is the Batman figure of this estranged future. While we do not see Batman directly kill an enemy in this show that's rated TV PG, we can infer that throughout this Batman's efforts leading this insurgency against a world-dominating totalitarian regime, that he has had to employ lethal violence in order to stay alive. In my comprehensive essay, The Brilliance of BVS, the Defining Contemporary Epic, I discussed the concept of brutalization as explained in Jean-Michel Valentin's book, Hollywood, the Pentagon, and Washington. He explains to the reader how brutalization is the process of a soldier loosening his restraints on his propensity towards violence. The more the soldier witnesses war and how fragile the lives of his enemies are, he begins to realize just how fragile his own life is, and that it can be taken at any moment. When stranded in the ocean of brutalities that accompany war, the soldier is likely to adopt the behavior of deadly violence, which becomes the norm. He does this to preserve the advance of the mission he is on. We can infer from the visuals, dialogue, and other aspects of Justice League: The Savage Time that this Batman values the completion of his mission over the lives of his enemies, and that his life is too fragile to risk the use of non-lethal means against ruthlessly violent enemies, because risking his life would mean certain failure of the mission. The most explicit example of this is found in Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition. During the build-up to the titular fight, we see a weary Bruce Wayne succumb to a dream where he finds himself in a firefight against hordes of enemies. The use of deadly violence against flying bug monsters is self-explanatory. Unless you plan on arresting a parademon, you better shoot to kill. Batman does face human enemies that he would not normally use lethal means against. However, this dream takes place on an Earth conquered by Darkseid. The hot sands of desertification sway across the surface of the planet, and pillars of fire stretch toward the skies as the oceans evaporate into mist. We can infer from the Flash's appearance following the dream that Batman and his team are trying to go back in time to reset the world to a period before Darkseid's damning conquest. Since the plan seems to be to erase this timeline out of existence completely, nothing that happens here matters in the long run. However, if Batman's team fails, then the Earth is lost forever. The stakes of his mission and the value of his life are far too great to risk the mercy of using non-lethal means against bloodthirsty soldiers. He could too easily lose his own life and forfeit the completion of the mission in an attempt to not falter to the ferocious fatality of brutalization. When enthralled by brutalization, consumed by desperation, and ravaged by the desolation of war, Batman kills. Batman kills. I've seen him do it. However, the taking of a life being present in so few Batman stories shows that this is not his normal mode of operation. Batman normally doesn't kill, but he has. So why? Throughout my studies of the instances where Batman kills, the primary motives for him to cross his line is when a child would inevitably lose their life if he does not act. The death of a murderous criminal or the sullying of Batman's hands will never be more consequential than the loss of a child. On the other hand, the deep waters of war will drown out any mortality that you entered the battlefield with. When the stakes of the battle are far too great to risk everyone's future, the necessity to stay alive and to carry out the mission is more imperative than Batman's unwillingness to take a life. Fans who value the preservation of the cleanliness of Batman's hands above all else usually refute the stories where Batman very necessarily kills by saying that the character should not have been put in that situation to begin with. Ridiculous. Zack Snyder, during his interview with Joe Rogan, compendiously refutes this naivety. I am paraphrasing a bit here, but he states that if you demand infallibility in a character, then that character will become irrelevant in those situations. So now, let's listen to his exact quote, just so everybody is on the same page.
Like, I want Batman, like people are always like, well, Batman can't kill. Right? So Batman can't kill is canon. And I'm like, okay, well, the first thing I want to do when you say that is I want to see what happens. And they go like, well, don't put him in a situation where he has to kill someone. I'm like, well, That's just like you're protecting your God in a weird way, right? You're making your God irrelevant if he can't be in that situation. He has to now deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, if he does do that, what does that mean? What does it tell you? But does he stand up to it? Can he survive that?
When this podcast first released, media outlets like Culture Crave and some others in the comic book space manipulatively spun this quote with the intention to convey the idea that he means that the character is irrelevant within popular culture if he doesn't kill his enemies. However, as always, the media outlets deceived people who lack discernment skills into believing that. What Snyder means to say is that if you will not allow a character to break their own imposed restrictions in situations that demand exactly that of them, then they become irrelevant and useless in those specific situations. If Batman is absolutely not allowed to take the life of a child's attacker, then he would be useless and irrelevant in situations where children are endangered. Let me make that pertinently clear, that if it requires taking a life to save a child, and if Batman is unwilling to take a life, then he is irrelevant in that situation where a child needs to be saved. It makes him useless and irrelevant in situations where children are endangered if he is unable to kill their attacker. If Batman is absolutely not allowed to take the life during the intense firefights of a war, then Batman is once again useless and irrelevant in war times. He becomes irrelevant and useless in situations where a life must be taken. And ideally, in a perfect world, there is no situation where a life must be taken. But however, life is not all hopscotch, rainbows, and puppies. Sometimes, in order to save the day, that is what is required. So I know what's coming by addressing this topic at all. And so before the response to this video is the thoughtless posting of that one scene from the animated Batman Under the Red Hood, I want to be clear that that scene is perfectly consistent with my stance on this debate. During that scene, there is no child's life in danger and there is no war. If Batman were to kill the Joker in that scene, it would not directly save the life of a child or help him win the conflict of a war. That scene perfectly displays Batman's code under normal circumstances. And normal circumstances are constituted by scenes where a child's life is not in danger and when he is not at war. In that scene, Batman also mentions that it is too easy to kill if he crossed that line, and so therefore he will never come back. And I am in almost total agreement with that, because what he is describing is brutalization.
You don't understand. I don't think you've ever understood.
What? What, your moral code just won't allow for that? It's too hard to cross that line?
No! God almighty, no! It'd be too damned easy. All I've ever wanted to do is kill him. A day doesn't go by when I don't think about subjecting him to every horrendous torture he's dealt out to others, and then end him. But if I do that, if I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back.
He is describing how he knows that by taking a life in an unnecessary situation, he would adjust to the fragility of his enemies' lives. Therefore, he would recognize how fragile his own life is, and he would begin to protect it through harsher means. This debate has gone on long enough. Under normal circumstances, Batman doesn't kill. But he has. So why? Without the threat of the loss of a child's life, or without literally being at war, Batman doesn't kill. However, in the face of insurmountable child endangerment and the desolation of war, Batman kills. This will conclude our study here tonight. While this essay is very research-based, a lot of my own opinion was thrown over top of it. However, throughout the entire mythos of Batman, I can't help but come to this conclusion. It seems like the only times he kills where it's relevant are in the two aforementioned situations. So, when I say this debate has gone on long enough, it seems that the two sides of it are too extreme in their convictions. Batman not killing ever, at all, whatsoever, is just plain incorrect. Because Batman kills. I've seen him do it. But also the fact that Batman will kill regardless of the circumstance is also incorrect. There are specific circumstances in which Batman finds it more heroic to take a life than to let the alternative happen. As always with this installment of Modern Saviors, we hope you learned something, and we hope you will apply that knowledge to your own life. The main question that we discern here at this channel is, how do you use your own power? And what do our comic book heroes and American mythology tell us about how to use our own power? So once again, I hope you learned something. And be sure to follow me on X and subscribe to our YouTube channel here. I wouldn't want you to miss out on the glory from the battles that we may face ahead. So to conclude, I would like to say thank you and good night.